What's up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are doing a complete and total debunk of the 10-part QAnon series Fall Cabal. Yes, the entire thing. We're going to go over every single false claim, all the misinformation, and call it out for what it is. If there is a certain part that I don't address in the video, I am going to put links in the description. But that's really only going to be for the first part because there's a couple things that aren't relevant to QAnon. But like I said, every single claim will be addressed. I want these videos to be your go-to source to pull anyone out of the QAnon rabbit hole, because this has gone on way too long and I've seen countless stories of people's brothers, sisters, mothers, aunts, uncles being so far down the Q rabbit hole that they can't even talk to them anymore. Bottom line, it's a scam, so I'm going to give you everything you need to debunk it. So hopefully you get some value out of this content. If you do, please tap that like button and share, comment, do all that stuff, because YouTube is going to suppress the shit out of this video. Real quick, for those that aren't initiated, the Fall Cabal is a 10-part series on YouTube that goes over the QAnon conspiracy, which is that all the elites, Democrats, and Hollywood people mostly are running child trafficking rings and doing all kinds of weird stuff with child sacrifice, and you'll see as we get into it. But the person that's going to save us all from this is Donald Trump and Q, who is a random messenger on a message board. This whole QAnon thing's been around since 2017, but ever since this 10-part documentary came out, it's basically doubled in popularity. So I'm going to go through the whole thing, and we're going to talk about every single lie she tells in this thing. It's a lot, so buckle up. We start off in part 1, titled Things That Make You Go, by getting to know our filmmaker, Yannet Osavard. This lady, right here. And she comes out swinging immediately. She talks about how the world is just not as it seems and that great salvation is around the corner. We just have to be prepared. Then we get our very first claim that there's something odd with these California forest fires. Look at this. How did this happen? And how did this happen? I'm going to leave several sources in the description explaining everything she talks about, because the first thing I really want to talk about is this.
We live in a world where mercury is considered highly toxic, but not when we inject it into children in absurd quantities.
Yeah, that's in no way accurate. Did you peep the InfoWars graphic, by the way? We definitely don't inject children, or anyone for that matter, with mercury. A small number of vaccines used to contain thimerosal, which has been proven again and again to be safe. But because some people had an issue with it, they even took that out. There's absolutely no way you could spend any time researching vaccines and come away thinking we inject mercury into people. Which is one of the points I want to make to people who are watching this that believe in Q. It's not that she's just getting a couple things wrong in this documentary. It's that she's intentionally misleading you. After that, she gets in a couple lines about chemtrails, links in description, and then we get this doozy.
And did you know that in many countries, among which my own Holland, we have to explicitly say no to organ donation, for if we don't, our organs will be property of the state as soon as we are declared brain dead?
That's going to be a hard no, because I have the entire law right here, and it says not a single thing about after you're brain dead that your organs become property of the state. Next, picking up right where we left off, we get some lies about the Vatican and the Pope.
Did you know that our current Pope is the first to state that hell does not exist, but the devil does?
So this lie comes from a fake news story that went a little viral back in 2018 after a tabloid-style Italian journalist, who apparently has a pretty bad relationship with the church, misquoted the Pope as saying this. Obviously, when the story came out back in 2018, the Pope immediately clarified that he did not say this. So if the Pope doesn't believe in hell, he damn sure didn't tell any of us. But wait, there's more fake news when it comes to the Vatican.
Did you know the Vatican's telescope is called Lucifer?
Well, put another one on the board. The telescope is called LBT, or Large Binocular Telescope. I know, very original. Now, it does list 12 instruments, and one of the instruments is a lens, and that lens is called Lucy. Now, they used to call that one lens, which is one part of this entire giant telescope, they used to call that one lens Lucifer. But that's it. The telescope is not called Lucifer. One lens used to be called Lucifer. So, yeah, close, I guess, maybe. Not really. This lady has me out here defending religion. And we finished up the Pope lies with a 2-for-1.
Since when does the Pope make the sign of the devil?
You gotta love those photos that she throws up in between lies. They are quite entertaining. So this one is definitely a Photoshop job because I found the exact same image on Adobe Stock, which is a website you can buy stock images from. And the second one I couldn't find an explanation for, so the Pope is clearly a devil-worshipping Satanist. Good night. Or it could be that that photo was taken in the Philippines, and that gesture means love over there in the Philippines. Yeah, just do one Google search and you will see this. Or, if you don't want to do that, as always, links in description. See, the reason for this entire episode is to overload you with all this bad stuff that's supposedly going on in the world. She makes over 40 false claims in this one episode. But if you're not fact-checking it, it just seems like a bunch of bad shit's just going on in the world. That way, when she opens the door and says, hey, check out Q, he offers the Great Awakening, and the salvation will be better once, we save the children and do this and do that, and Donald Trump is king of the world, overlord, or whatever. This approach is textbook cult brainwashing 101. So I'm going to be skipping over a few things that she goes over because it would just take way too much time, but I have plenty of links in the description talking about all of it and debunking all of it. She goes over 9/11 conspiracies, crisis actors, very easily proven false stuff, some stuff in kids' cartoons. She does a bunch of more dumb faces. And like I said, plenty of sources in the description debunking all that stuff. I want to stick more to the Q stuff and the stuff that she really uses to set up Q for later. Like this.
Did you know that fully grown fetuses can be legally aborted in many American states? That advocates of full-term abortion state that unborn babies cannot feel pain? Is abortion of a fully grown baby not the same as murder?
So this is just false. You can have an abortion in the United States anywhere between 20 and 24 weeks depending on the state. That's the max, unless the mother's health or life is at serious risk. Now, I already know that somebody's going to bring up the Virginia bill in the comments section, so I'll just go ahead and address that. That did not make it legal for you to be able to abort fully grown babies. That's infanticide. That's murder, okay? The only thing that bill changed is that before in Virginia, you had to have 3 doctors sign off if the mother's health was at serious risk or if she was possibly going to die. Before, 3 doctors had to sign off on this before they could abort the baby past 24 weeks. Now it only has to be 1 doctor, your primary doctor. That is all that bill did. That's it. I can already hear some Karen typing in the comments, what about Virginia? And again, I have several different sources in the description backing these claims up. Then moving on, she makes a couple false claims about the caravan, which we will cover in great detail later, so skip that for now. A couple more lies about some face creams that celebrities use. Again, links in description. Then we get this whopper.
Did you know that diseases such as AIDS, Zika, SARS, and Ebola are actually patented? Do you know when something is patented? When it's man-made. Man-made diseases. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, this claim is just false. It doesn't have to be man-made in order to be patented. A lot of the times, government agencies like the CDC will patent lower forms of a virus to try to pull parts out of it and make a vaccine out of it. It's just completely false, 100%. So then she goes on to tell some lies about technology, and then she talks about Monsanto, which is a terrible company, but doesn't do the stuff that she talks about. Then we get our first look at the Hillary email scandal, and this is what she has to say about it.
Hillary Clinton admitted that she deleted 33,000 emails from a private server used as Secretary of State. Did she actually get away with that?
Yeah, there's no debunk here. Hillary Clinton's shady as hell. She's not doing what they say she's doing, but shady as hell nonetheless. The funny part about this is the claim she follows this up with.
They were completely ignored by the mainstream media. Not one news channel covered or questioned any of it.
Honestly, this might be the worst take in the entire 10-part series. The Hillary Clinton email scandal was the most covered thing in the entire year of 2016 by all sides, more than all the Trump scandals. I still hear 10 times a day, what about her emails? To say that the mainstream media did not cover the email scandal might be the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, you have to live in an alternate reality. I'm pretty sure on Mars they hear about what about her emails. I just found that one a bit funny. There's not much there, but I found that one kind of funny. And that's pretty much the end of this episode. She finishes up by saying how she slowly realized that Trump was the savior of us all. And just to push one more conspiracy, she talks about how Seth Rich was the one who leaked the DNC emails to WikiLeaks, a conspiracy that's been debunked several times over. So now we head into part 2 where it gets just a little bit deeper.
Out of nowhere arose the enigma of Q.
So, now we get to start talking about Q and its many, many misconceptions. She starts off in part 2 by talking about how the Q drops opened her eyes, even though she's been a known conspiracy theorist for the past 20 years, so definitely a lie there. She actually wrote a book about crop circles all the way back in 1997. She says that Q talks of a world without war and free of suffering, and how this will all take place after the Great Awakening.
The Q-Crumbs portray a better world, without wars, treason and corruption. A world after the Great Awakening.
She then starts to talk about how there's a secret war going on and the Illuminati is real, the deep state is real, and Q is giving them all the clues they need to defeat them. She then talks about the QAnon movement like they're the Avengers or something while heroic music plays in the background.
A battle between good and evil. This is what Q is pointing out to us. But we the Anons have to do the research. And we do. Like nerds. Like an army of digital autists, we connect the dots.
So now that she's appealed to your emotions and created this world where you're a digital soldier, she now introduces the lies section of part 2 where she gives you more stuff to be upset about that isn't true.
Only 2 American presidents who tried to break down the power of the elite, beginning with the banks by printing their own interest-free, debt-free money, thus bypassing the Federal Reserve System, were Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. What else did they have in common? They got murdered.
Okay, so there's a lot wrong with that statement, starting with the fact that the Federal Reserve was created 50 years after Lincoln died, so kind of hard to oppose something that came after you were dead. Adding on to that, Lincoln created what was known as a national banking system, and he also signed into law the National Currency Act, which is the foundation for what the Federal Reserve was built on. Now, it's tough to say if Lincoln would be happy with the current state of the Federal Reserve, but to say he opposed the idea is just flat out wrong. And the narrative that Kennedy had it out for the Fed is also false. It comes from the Executive Order 11110, which had the Treasury temporarily print silver certificates. This theory actually comes from a book that was published many years after Kennedy's death called Crossfire by Jim Marrs, where he theorized that maybe Kennedy wanted to take away power from the Fed by slowly replacing Fed notes with silver certificates. This theory doesn't really hold a lot of water because, again, it was a temporary thing that they were doing. It's really just one of the many, many theories as to why Kennedy was shot. So to say Kennedy had it out for the Fed is just dishonest at best. And moving on, we get into false banking conspiracies.
Now, why are the banks so important? What exactly is the Federal Reserve and its central banks? The Federal Reserve is the central bank system of the US. The Federal Reserve and all central banks around the world are privately owned. They are not government institutions.
All right, look, I understand most people don't think about the Fed at all, ever, especially on a day-to-day basis, especially now with everything that's going on. But how anyone could think that the Federal Reserve is privately owned or take somebody seriously that says that, I mean, it's just really kind of beyond me. Now, the Fed does have a board like most banks, but the small difference is they are all picked by the sitting president, and then they are all confirmed by the Senate. The current head of the Federal Reserve is Jerome Powell, which, if you follow financial news at all, you will know that does pretty much exactly whatever Donald Trump tells him to do. Everything they do with the money is public knowledge, and they also have press conferences every quarter. These people are public servants just like anybody else who works in the White House. They're not some secret group that controls all the power. And we're moving on. Next, she says during the Fed's creation, it had fierce opposition from 3 brave rich men.
The Federal Reserve was set up in 1913 after quite a bit of opposition from the US government and some very wealthy people such as Benjamin Guggenheim, Isidor Straus, and John Jacob Astor,
So there's definitely a theme in this episode, and that is that anybody that gets in the cabal's way is taken out immediately. So how did these three men get taken out?
What else did they have in common? Apart from money, power, and opposing the creation of the US Federal Reserve? They all died on April 15, 1912, when the ship they traveled on hit an iceberg and disappeared in the cold ocean.
First, I find it funny that all the rich and powerful elites are in on this cabal, except for these three. These three are the good guys. And at first look, if you don't go any farther into it, it is kind of strange that these three men all opposed the Fed and they all died on the Titanic in 1915. But did they oppose the Fed? Luckily, newspapers existed back then, and while I couldn't find any public opinion either way on the matter from Guggenheim or Astor, Isidor Straus publicly supported the Federal Reserve. You see, it's not that these men died because of some deep state cabal. It's that they died, and now she's misrepresenting the facts of the situation to make it look like maybe not, maybe they did cross the cabal, and that's why the ship sank. I mean, no, it's propaganda 101. She's using the fact that they died and misrepresenting it to fit her narrative, same way she did with Kennedy and Lincoln. So while it does make for a great scary story about the reach of the cabal, there's absolutely no evidence to support that any of these men opposed the Fed. And one, again, publicly supported it. So then she has this to say about the creation of the Fed.
US Congress was bypassed. The Fed was created illegally, unconstitutionally, something not many people are aware of.
So I know you've heard this a lot already, but this is not true. Also, she shows a picture of Franklin Roosevelt signing a bill in 1934, even though the Federal Reserve Act was passed in 1913. But anyway, the Federal Reserve Act was created and passed through Congress back in 1913. Now, some people over the years have argued that it's unconstitutional, but that argument has been struck down several times by the Supreme Court. So no, the Fed was not created illegally in any shape, form, or fashion, and it was definitely passed through the proper channels, through Congress, all that jazz. I'll leave a good write-up about the history of the Fed in the description. So moving on, we are introduced to the Rothschild family, which according to her own most of the world. Put a pin in that for later, by the way. She brings up how the Rothschilds control the Federal Reserve, which we've already proven false. Then she has this to say.
Control the World Health Organization. They financed both parties of every war since the war against Napoleon. They financed the Bolshevik Revolution. They financed Hitler and the Nazis.
Well, that was a lot. Let's start with the WHO, which is an international organization that's part of the UN. It is not owned by anybody. It was started in 1948 by several different countries. Fun fact, the day it was started is known as National Health Day. Now you can donate to the WHO, but 99% of its money comes from countries who give a portion of their GDP every single year in order to fund it. So on the war stuff, outside of being their accountant, there's no way I could possibly confirm or deny if they spent their money on this. But I know who doesn't confirm it, and that's her, because she gives no evidence for it outside of saying that it happened. All this is Jews control the world propaganda and a little bit different package. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the Rothschilds, a Jewish family, might have had a few issues with a couple of the things Hitler did. Probably more than a few. Then she mentions that the Rothschilds had stock in a few companies that did some shady things.
And they had equities in Exxon and IG Farben, the dealers of Zyklon B gas for the Nazi gas chambers.
So this is a small point, but it comes up several more times throughout this documentary, so I just want to address it. Just because you own stock in a company does not mean you have any say in what they do, or that you know all the inner workings of everything they have going on. I do a lot of day trading. I own stock in 10 different companies right now. I have no say in what they do at all, nor do I know every single thing that is going on with all those companies. And I do a ton of research into them, but that doesn't mean I know everything that's going on with them. And rich people especially, and the Rothschilds are a very rich family, they own stock in a ton of companies. That's just normal. That does not mean Just because you own a million shares in a company does not mean you get to go to the CEO and say, oh, hey, I think we should do this quarter. It's not how it works. It's a very common misconception people have. Oh, they own stock in this company, so therefore they get to control what they do. No, not the case, any way, shape, or form. She then tries to say that the Rothschilds obtained a patent after Malaysia Flight 370 disappeared, implying that they had a hand in making it disappear. So this theory comes from a few years back when supposedly 4 of the 5 owners of the semiconductor company out of Austin, Texas disappeared on the Malaysia Flight 370. And the 5th one was supposedly Mr. Rothschild. But this theory is just a misrepresentation of the facts, as usual. Because 1, these people don't even appear on the flight log for Malaysia Flight 370. 2, the company owned the patent. These 4 people were just the inventors, which doesn't matter because the company owned the patent. They're the ones that have it. And while the Rothschilds had stock in this company, they had nothing to do with the patent. They didn't own the company at all. So yet again, another example of completely misrepresenting the facts of the situation. Next, we get introduced to another elite family in the cabal, the Rockefellers.
Another family of great influence are the Rockefellers. They made their initial fortune through oil. That fortune led to massive industrial influence.
One thing I find kind of funny is all these videos never have any recent pictures of these elites. Like, they use the same 4 pictures from like the 1920s. I mean, these dudes are still rocking top hats. Before we get more into the role the Rockefellers play in all this, I want to make something clear. Rich people can obviously buy influence, and I'm for major reforms. I'm all about hashtag eat the rich, taxing the shit out of these people. But you lose me when you start talking about deep state Illuminati cabals. 2 things can be true at once. We can have a problem with elites having too much power, and this lady can still be lying her ass off to you about pretty much everything in this video and trying to indoctrinate you in a cult. But let's continue with the Rockefellers now.
They founded schools and universities, leaving a huge imprint on what should and should not be taught to our children and students, the banking system, and the pharmaceutical industry. They now own the Rockefeller University with its Academy of Medicine and the Academy of Sciences, the International Health Foundation, the American Cancer Society, the Drug Trust, the American Medical Association, and the FDA. Everything was in the hands of the Rockefellers.
So there actually is a little bit of truth mixed in there. It does seem like the Rockefellers had a part in founding the Drug Trust, and they seem to have been big donors for the International Health Foundation. But when it comes to the American Cancer Society, or the AMA, which was founded by a doctor named Nathan Davis, it looks like they had absolutely no part in its founding. And finally, and I can't believe I've had to say this several times now, but the FDA is a government agency, and nobody can own a government agency. That's just what it is. Sorry to tell you this, Yannette. And then she brings up the fact that they have a school. It's a small private school in New York, by the way. But what does that mean? I know somebody else who had a small private school in New York. Is he in the cabal? And I guess this is just kind of my opinion, but just because you give donations to a school does not mean anything. It just means you gave donations to a school. You don't get to run the curriculum because you donate to a school. Now, she gives no evidence for these claims. Again, she just says them. And to anybody watching this video that is buying this or believes in this theory or whatever, I want you to give me any shred of evidence that the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds, throw them in there too, any of their donations to any of these schools, show me something that proves that they are influencing the curriculum. Just anything. Send me something. So moving on, we get a few more lies about vaccines, and since we already covered that, I'm going to tell you to, again, check the studies in the description that I have debunking all of this. Then we get this hot take.
The Rockefellers were also responsible for adding the toxic chemical waste product fluoride to our water and toothpaste. And as usual, the media spread lies about its healing qualities. No doctor or dentist ever tested its efficacy. They simply told their patients what they'd been taught at the Rockefeller institutions.
I like how she does a callback there to the schools, and since the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, they own all the schools, and none of the dentists ever learned that fluoride was actually bad for you. If only one dentist was able to sneak through, maybe we could have saved some lives. Except that's in no way the story of how we got fluoride in our water. A bunch of dentists in the Midwest started pushing for it. Then the town of Grand Rapids, Michigan started doing it. 5 years later, the kids in Grand Rapids had way less cavities than the kids in the surrounding area. And then it picked up from there. The kids in those towns had less cavities, and then it grew out from there and it became a nationwide thing. Definitely didn't have anything to do with the Rockefellers controlling the entire school system and dentists just not knowing. And because she kind of brings it up, and I know somebody's going to bring it up in the comment section, no, the Nazis did not use fluoride to make people easier to control. Didn't happen. Remember when I told you to put a pin in it when she said the Rothschilds controlled most of the world? Well, this is why.
In short, two very powerful families that rule the world and its population are the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. And guess what? They are not even the most powerful.
So wait a damn minute. Earlier you said that the Rothschilds own most of the world. The world. But there's families more powerful than them? Is it Thanos? Is Thanos real? So immediately after saying there's more powerful families in the world, what imagery does she show?
And guess what? They are not even the most powerful. There are other families that exceed the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, both in money and in power.
So you're probably asking, what secret society are those menacing looking dudes from? Well, that would be the Kappa Gamma fraternity, for the deaf. Yes, that's right. She tells you that there's more powerful people in the world and then shows you a deaf fraternity. Guess she ran out of those other 4 pictures. Then we finish up part 2 by getting introduced to king of conspiracy theory lore himself, George Soros. This, of course, won't be the last time she mentions George Soros, but she gets in some pretty good lies about him right off the bat.
Soros strikes me for his choice of funding. For example, NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association. Then there's Antifa, the anti-fascist movement. When we look at their actions, we see nothing but violence. They show great resemblance with fascism, which is rather strange for an anti-fascist movement. Even one of their flags is weird in that sense.
I feel like it should go without saying, but obviously there is no proof that George Soros has ever donated to NAMBLA. Can you imagine how big of a story that would be if one of the top Democratic Party donors donated to a group that was pro-pedophilia? If he has ever donated to this group, it's definitely not public knowledge. And she definitely doesn't provide any information that he donates to them. All the places that Soros or his Open Society Foundation donate to is public knowledge. And the same goes for Antifa. Soros does not donate to or fund them. But she did get kind of sneaky with that flag claim. Let's double check that.
Flags is weird in that sense. Why would any...
Wait a minute, and enhance that image. At first glance, it looks like that's an AF on that flag. But it's actually an NF for National Front, which is a far-right Nazi movement. This picture is after an Antifa member snatched the flag from one of the Nazis that was carrying it at a protest. Now that might seem like a small thing, but if she would have done even one Google search, she would have realized that that's not the Antifa flag. And that really goes to show that her whole goal with this entire series is not to tell you the truth, but to push an agenda, which is what I'm trying to show you in great detail. Honestly, it's going to sound like I'm beating a dead horse at times throughout this series, but it's important that we cover as many topics, as many ways as we can, so that way when you go to try to pull your friend out of the Q hole, you have all the ammunition you could possibly need. So with that being said, follow me to part 3. So a big chunk of part 3 is dedicated to the migrant caravan. She uses this event to show that, again, things are not as they seem, and that the QAnon researchers, they're one step ahead of the lies.
I saw the first pictures, I was shocked. But then I realised there were just too many images of women and children, which is always a sign of media manipulation and a hidden political agenda. Always. Critical thinkers like the QAnons studied the pictures closely. Too many things did not add up.
Now there's a reason she covers this in great detail, because her goal is to get you to distrust the media. If she can convince you that an event of such magnitude is staged, then you won't trust what they have to say when it comes to debunking any of her claims. And if you believe the Anons got it right, you're going to want to get more info from them. This is the last thing she really covers in any detail before we get deep into Q lore. Let's see the case she makes for why it is staged.
These people had to walk for 45 miles a day, each and every day for 1.5 months. But these people don't look exhausted. They're not dirty or sweaty. I mean, look at them. Their clothes are clean. Clean babies. Clean pants. They wear labels. They are well fed. These people aren't refugees. They're not poor. Buses and vans were deployed to transport all of these people from Honduras to the US border. Flip-flops? No problem. You only have to get out of the van occasionally for a group photo. To get as many people as possible, you pay them. Thanks to some alert anons, this was filmed on site. Then, in order to be efficient for the media, you give the main players a coloured wristband. Brilliant! Different colours have different meanings, all known to the reporters and the cameramen.
Honestly, the way she puts together parts of that segment is pretty convincing. And if you didn't really follow the caravan and you just heard about it in passing, you might be willing to buy it, which sets up well for her for you to buy the rest of it. But if you follow the caravan closely, you might have noticed a few holes in that story. So she does a nice little editing trick there when she shows the buses. First she shows people outside, and then she cuts back and shows people inside. Literally none of the people she shows on the bus were outside the bus. You can pause and check it out. And the migrant caravan got as big as 7,000 people. And if buses were deployed, let's say 50 people a bus, that's 140 buses. And seeing as she said they had to get outside occasionally for a group photo, that would mean a convoy of 140 buses. And as many people that were trying to poke holes in the caravan, I think maybe somebody might have noticed that. And if buses were deployed, why are they on this flatbed truck? Like anyone else in this situation, they hitchhiked when they could. And in the case of the spring migrant caravan, the first people of the caravan arrived a month and a half later. Probably the ones that were able to get the most help. It was a couple hundred people, and that caused a huge holdup at the border. And slowly throughout the months, in both cases, migrants trickled in that were part of the caravan. So to be clear, the only one claiming they had to walk the entire way is Yannette. Obviously, they're going to try to get rides when they can. And the wristbands were also issued by the Mexican government to monitor the flow of traffic in and out of the country. Here's a full story about it. And they also had a ton of help along the way from churches and locals who gave them food, shelter, and a place to clean up. Because in those countries, they actually support people seeking a better life. The most dishonest thing in that little segment is the photo she shows of supposedly people getting paid that the Anons uncovered. Well, that photo actually comes from a video of local store owners handing out money to women and children because they have a very long road ahead of them. And after some people tweeted it out because it shows a good deed being done, Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz found it, tweeted it out, and started this conspiracy theory that they were getting paid by Soros, because he literally funds everything. After it was confirmed by local Guatemalan journalists that those were store merchants handing out money to women and children, Matt Gaetz sorta kinda half-ass walked it back. But let's just go with the narrative that they were being paid to be in the caravan. First off, why are none of the men in that video getting paid? Second off, do you know how much those bills are worth in American dollars? Between 13 and 26 cents. Yeah, So, if you think that people are uprooting their entire lives to travel the trip from hell all the way to America for between 13 and 26 cents, well, then I'm not sure anything I say the rest of this entire series is going to get through to you. She then tries to say that the photos of the mom running away from the tear gas are staged and that all the tear gas photos are fake, when there's video of it and President Trump defended the use of tear gas. She even tries to claim that the tear gas canisters are props. Also, the lady they try to claim as an actor, Time did a follow-up piece on her, and 6 months later she was still waiting on her asylum claim. That's dedication to a role. I'll finish this up by saying check out the 2 documentaries of people who traveled with the caravan, and then think of the level of scale it would take to have planned something like this and executed everything if it was fake. And now 2 years later, not a single person has ever come forward and said, I was paid to be in the caravan. Tons more data about everything that went on, including those documentaries, in the description. And of course, she says Soros bankrolled this whole thing, just like he bankrolled the riots in Ferguson, Missouri, which again is not true. She then shows this picture and tries to say Soros forgot to pay his debts, and these Antifa members were shouting, "Where's our money, Soros?" Which is an obvious troll. Also, Yannette, Beverly Hills Antifa is a troll account, which is a thing people do on Twitter. Or did you actually think Devin Nunes' cow was tweeting stuff out? So, moving on, now that she has you completely distrusting the media, we get back to talking about Q and his mission statement. She then praises Trump for all his great accomplishments and says the media has an agenda against him, just like they had an agenda with the caravan. She then claims he signed a law against human trafficking right after he was inaugurated, and she illustrates this with a picture from April 11th, 2018. Then she brings up an executive order Trump signed back in 2017, trying to say that it has something to do with stopping sex trafficking. But from everything I read about the order, it doesn't seem to have anything to do with that. It seems to be targeting a specific group of people over human rights abuses and placing sanctions on them. But again, nothing about sex trafficking, and she doesn't explain it in any way. So then she shows us a couple more images, and then she shows one with the number of trafficking cases every year, and a quote from HuffPo. So I, of course, looked up the article that supposedly said this, and I found that it's actually 8,500 cases per year, which is up 1,000 since Trump took office. And this is what the article actually had to say. The president's conflation of immigration with human trafficking serves an agenda. He has warned of caravans threatening to shuttle waves of dangerous immigrants across the U.S.-Mexico border, a fear-mongering tactic that echoes racist and derogatory comments he made on his campaign trail in the first year of his presidency. That was pretty close to what she put in the graphic. I mean, tomato, who's counting, right? And finally, we end part 3 talking about whistleblowers. She gives us a list of 4 names that are supposedly trying to bring down the cabal and tells us to Google them. So, I did. First up is John Kirikou, a former CIA officer who she claims said this as a whistleblower. This was a bad joke he made at a Q&A. He was trying to make the point that CIA agents will basically do anything when it comes to trying to get a source. I mean, you could obviously say that maybe the joke has roots in fact, and maybe he does know somebody that's actually done this before, but you damn sure can't call him a whistleblower, and at the minimum, this claim she makes is misleading. Next up, we have Todd Gunderson, a former FBI agent who made claims such as these. So oddly enough, Todd was one of the biggest pushers of the satanic panic back in the 80s and 90s. Although back then it was mostly kids in trench coats they were worried about. Now it's Ellen and Oprah. But despite the claims that Todd made, he never provided any evidence for them. He did have a couple of people come forward and say they had suppressed memories of having mind control done on them in the 80s, but that was it. He seemed to be very influenced by Jewish banking conspiracies that he believed in, and like I said, he never really provided any evidence for anything he ever claimed. Next we have John Wedger, and she just tells us to Google his name. Probably because she doesn't even want to vouch for this guy. He's a former officer in the London Metro Police who claims to have uncovered a well-organized pedo ring that the Metro Police was covering up for. The problem is, he has no evidence for these claims, which only came about after he was fired, and he's been involved in at least one other case that was proven to be a hoax. He's also part of a group that advocates drinking bleach as a cure for autism, and that picture she shows of him in the Fall Cabal is of him giving testimony at the International Tribunal for Natural Justice, which is a fake court that holds hearings on conspiracy theories. Not to mention that the details of the story he gives as to why he was fired is something out of a comic book. He literally says that his superior said things to him like, "You don't know how far this goes," and "We didn't think you would dig this deep." I'll link it in the description. It's kind of long, but it's definitely worth a read. You know, I'm beginning to think maybe she didn't want us to Google these people. The last thing she wants us to Google is just what happened with Sacha Baron Cohen on his sketch show. He gave the FBI some information about a concierge who seemed to suggest he could get him a young date. He turned it over, and Trump's FBI found no reason to pursue it further. Then, to finish off this episode, we get a couple more articles. Let's see what they say.
This is nothing new. It was just never dealt with until now.
So let's take one more look at those sources she just gave us. Well, according to this, Chelsea Clinton said Pizzagate is real. Seems a little fishy. So, throughout these videos, she uses sites like that several more times. So let's talk about it. Sites like that are designed for one thing and one thing only, and that is to get clicks and shares. Because clicks and shares turn into dollars. Hell, a lot of the times they're just headlines that don't even have an article inside them. Or they'll say something like, "This has not yet been verified." Because once you click on it, that's all they need. They don't need you to read the article. They just need the click or the share. Because a lot of people will just share a headline. These sites are complete garbage. And she is using them as sources. That should tell you something. I mean, for Christ's sakes, the bottom text on that article says that Trump has ordered a federal investigation into Pizzagate. Listen, bad people exist. The elites have too much power. And human trafficking is a real issue. But following the words of this lady with no sources, no real data, and no real solutions, who is clearly manipulating you, is definitely not the way. I promise you that. But maybe I haven't sold you yet. After all, we haven't even gotten to the real deal Pizzagate stuff yet. We're going to cover all that in part 2, which will be in the box at the end of this video. Just click it, it'll take you there. Feel free to check out any of the 6,000 sources I probably have linked in the description. If for some reason you don't see something, just hit me up in the comments and I'll see if I can find it. It's possible I maybe forgot to put something down there. If you somehow made it to the end of this long-ass video, thank you so much. You have no idea how much it means that you would watch 42 minutes of my content. But thanks a lot for watching. You can follow me on all the other social medias. I post a lot of QAnon debunk stuff on TikTok. I also have an Instagram and a Twitter. You can follow me on there. All the same name, Driven Progressive. Please give this video a like, share, comment, because it's going to be suppressed like a sumbitch. Maybe think about subscribing. And if you subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. Otherwise, you won't get them because YouTube doesn't care about me like that. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching, guys. Part 2, click the box. Go check it out. Thanks a lot, y'all. Peace.